What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to NRL Fantasy Buy, Hold, Sell for round 22 with the Casual Athlete. Now, if you haven't seen us before, my name's Longy. I'm a previous NRL Fantasy overall champ, and myself and Biz normally too are here to help you win your fantasy leagues and get as high as you possibly can in those rankings. No Biz tonight. He's off gallivanting in New York, but we'll have him back next week. Now, let's jump right into these buy, hold, sell options here because there are some really, really interesting options to go through. First one here, look, Nathan Cleary. We talked about Cleary last week. Now, Cleary had a bit of an underwhelming game. The Panthers dusted up the Dogs. Cleary didn't have to do too much in that game. They rocketed out to an early lead there. They won that game comfortably. Dogs sort of brought the scoreline back to normal a bit towards the end, but he only posted about a 50-point game. Now, that drops him down to 930K. He's dropped about 53K as well, so there's a good chance he could be down around 900K next week. Saying that, I think it's the wrong time in the season to be counting pennies. If you want Cleary and if you can afford Cleary, buy him right now because his fixture this week is Cronulla. And Cronulla, we know them. They posted 26 points in a loss last week against Manly. What did Trey Evans do? He posted a massive score. Now, for Cleary, I think this is the perfect matchup. It's a team with poor defense and great attack. So it could be a bit of a shootout by Penrith standards. Probably still low scoring because it is Penrith, but I think Cleary is going to have to do a lot more in this game. So for me, Cleary is the top captain option this week. If you can get him in and enjoy that ride. Next one here is Latrell Mitchell. He was the guy in the picture. We've got to mention him. Now, Latrell is named to play this week. I don't think he's a buy this week. I think you take the gamble. You could take the gamble. If you're fighting for a playoff spot, maybe, or you just really want that pod, then he's got the Tigers this week. That's the kind of game where he could burrow over for a couple of tries. The Tigers have been very, very disjointed down the stretch of this season. For Latrell, I think the interesting thing about him and the South players in general is that, particularly for the outside backs, they have a very easy run of fixtures coming up. So they've got 3 or 4 games that are really, really soft in terms of defense. Then they do have that grand final bye in round 26, where if you're playing head-to-head and you have a good commissioner for your comp, then your grand final is going to be round 26 and you won't have South players. So I think they're going to get you to the grand final, but you might need to save a trade or two for them at that point. Latrell, I like him. I'm keeping an eye on him. Yeah, he could explode over this next month of footy. Cam Murray's the next one. Cam Murray is rock solid. Look, we told you to buy Cam Murray last week. 676K. He's gone up a little bit since then. He posted about 70 points last week. He's just that guy. Cam Murray's a guy where I wouldn't be shocked if he gets to 900K by the end of the season. Some big games would be needed for that. But he's a guy that is worth about 850K in general. So last week it was a 200K discount. I get that the buys aren't favorable. I get the matchups are easier, so he could get a rest in those games. For the forwards, not as much of a plus. I still think he's just that guy. And you got to find a way to get him in, and you got to figure it out when you get to round 26. So Cam Murray, look, he's a must-have at this point in my head. Unless you can give me a really good case why you can't have him. I think you have to go get Cam Murray. Dan Gagai next. So 679K. Now, we talk about him a bit, but he's still a pod. And the center position is still pretty dodgy. We saw Val Holmes get sin bin last week. We saw some lower scores from some centers. Lemuelu, he's named to start this week. He had that bye last week. Joey Manu, people are asking questions about buying, holding, selling him as well. It's tricky with the center spot. And Dan Gagai, 679K, he could be one of the top centers here. The other option there is Ruben Garrick at 673K. Now, if you're asking me which one of those I prefer, that's a hard one. Why did I ask myself that question? Look, Dan Gagai is in a very exciting Newcastle attack, which is really good for him. But Ruben Garrick's base is just, it's unmatched at fullback. I mean, Dan Gagai, though, I looked at his last 6 games. He hasn't run below 140 meters in any game. So that's a 14-point base. It usually comes with some offloads, some tackle breaks. He is just rock solid. I like Ruben Garrick because he can swap between center and wing fullback, and for me, I've got Joey Manu as well, and I've got Carraz on the bench. So that allows me a bit of flexibility with my roster. But if I was trying to make up ground on a couple of teams, maybe I was on the cusp of that top 10, for example, I'd look at a guy like Gagai because he could very quickly score you a couple of 70-point games and make up ground there. He's a big pod. He's got that little injury cloud, but it's pretty much gone away now. I think he's rock solid. And Ruben Garrick, very, very solid. Could do very well against St. George this week, Ruben Garrick. Next group of guys we got here is the cheapies. Now, yeah, last week we recommended some very good cheapies. In fact, I'm going to humble brag here. We recommended June Tubo. He scored 70 plus. Recommended Aaron Clark, 70 plus. Karaz got a 43 in a loss. And who else was it? It was Joseph Suoli'i. He got about 55 or something like that. So all those guys below 400k that we recommended. We did say Offa Hangawi as well as one to look at. He was a dud. But 4 out of 5, I'm pretty happy with that record. This is the list for this week. It's interesting. Look, Tane Milne's the first one there. I've already said it all. South's matchups, South's fixtures. If you're in a draft league and you're not sure what you're doing with that spot, Tane Milne's going to score a few tries over the next month of footy. That's all I'm saying. Look, 365k is pretty pricey, but he could pop off for some big games, especially with Latrell back too. Andrew Davey, look, obviously Sean Lane is out for about 6 weeks now. So Andrew Davey, 392k. He's going to start. It doesn't look like Madison's going to play big minutes on the edge. He's got a pretty high break even. So if you need to wait a week on this one, you can wait a week. That's fine. But I think Andrew Davey could be one of those guys who, for a very low price, is going to score you 40 points a week. So could be interesting. Keep an eye on him, see how he goes. Dan Russell's the next one. Oh, and this guy, prototypical fantasy gun. So 265k, rock bottom price. He played 80 minutes last week. He made 40 tackles, 100 meters, scored 40 points. So he had a couple of negatives there. He's just a worker. He's a worker. Now, plus side is obviously he's a worker. That 80 minutes, that reflects well as well. They got a win in that game too. They're probably not going to win this week against Manly, but 265k, he's worth the gamble. I mean, that's the cheapest guy we have on this list. Unless you're getting a red dot or a real dud sort of player, I think Dan Russell's the top cash out this week. The risk is that Jack Bird's on that bench. So keep an eye on that. It could blow up on your face, but if you're getting Russell, you're probably not getting him as a starter. So I like the gamble at 265k. Wade Graham and Finifuyaki as well. So these are a couple of other guys that have gotten starting spots recently in the edge too. Wade Graham, I don't think so. He's had one game above 40 minutes this year. I just don't see him sort of getting it done. I can't pronounce the name at the start of last week. Was it Colquhoun, something like that? He's out 1 week, suspended. So he could easily come back in and take that spot. Do not buy Wade Graham. I'm not into it. I do love Wade Graham as a player, though. Like, obviously, you look at him about 5 years ago, he's one of the best forwards in the comp. But for fantasy, we're not touching that. Finifuyaki, this is interesting. So Nanai is obviously out for a while with his injury. I think it's 4 weeks there. That buys Finifuyaki a bit of time. I believe they do have the bye after this week, though, which is a bit of a downside. But for him, look, 268k, he's shown he's a very explosive player. This Cowboys attack is fantastic as well. He's a gamble you could take. And he's a very different player to Dan Russell. So Dan Russell is that 40 tackles, 100 meters kind of guy. Finifuyaki could score a try, could score a couple of tries, could really benefit from some attacking upside, just like we saw Lukey do earlier in the year, just like we see from Nanai. The Cowboys feed those edge back rowers. So I know I'm intrigued by that. Look, you're back in the talent or you're back in the minutes, but there is risk to both of them. Obviously, there's edge back rowers on the bench and the extended bench for the Cowboys too. So 80 minutes is not guaranteed. I think it's not likely at all. I think we could see maybe 50 minutes. Finifuyaki, it could even be a case where he moves back to the bench, comes off the bench, plays that 50 minutes. It could be anything. So if you're going to buy him, leave it as late as you can, is all I'm going to say. Next group here, we've got the middies. Now, this is for coaches who are in the comments asking for, who's the best guy I can buy under 500k? Who's the best wing fullback I can buy under 500k? Who's the best hooker I can get right now? Blah, blah, blah. Obviously, you've done a few things right, a few things wrong this season. You don't have the cash for the big guns we're talking about. So I'm going to say some middies here. First one, Dylan Edwards. Look, we talked about him quite a bit, 574k. He was in our hold or sell section last week. I said to hold on. Scored 52 against the Dogs. He didn't have many attacking stats in that game, but that sort of speaks to who he is as a player, in that it's that work rate that you're buying into there for Dylan Edwards. 574k, he's undervalued. Plain and simple. He's probably a 674 type K player. So he's probably about 100k undervalued. He's a guy where we're going to talk about Joey Manu later on, but if you have an overpriced player in your roster and you want to free up some cash and get a guy who's still pretty solid, I think Cleary coming back means that Dylan Edwards is going to be really solid down the stretch. So he obviously really struggled for scores. He was flying before Cleary got injured. Sort of fell off a cliff through Origin there, where he didn't have those guys setting him up, but they're going to have Cleary back, or they already do. So Dylan Edwards is a hot option. Jake Graz, I got him last week as well. So Cam Murray and Graz were my 2 buys last week. He scored a 43 in a game where they got absolutely destroyed. Didn't have any attacking stats. Obviously has his tackle breaks, his offloads. Look, Graz is kind of matchup proof. He's at wing fullback right now. He's been playing center. But when he is at center, he's just crushing it. He runs big meters. He creates a lot of stats there. So if you need a guy as a loophole option or something like that, and I'm going to go through a loophole video today as well, with Karaz actually, and Joey Manu in that one. But yeah, Karaz he's just a guy who has a lot of upside. He seems to have a really solid base. If you're looking for a cheapie that you can plug in, I think Karaz is one of the best options around. He seems very safe, as long as he stays fit. That's the big thing there. Brandon Smith. Now, Brandon Smith, 517K. We have had this conversation so many times, and I'm sure you are sick to death of me talking about Brandon Smith, even though it hasn't been recent, but start of the year, there's a lot of chat. Now, Brandon Smith, 517K. I want to outline a few things for you here. First thing, he played about 70 minutes last week. He started in that game. The Roosters won well, and Brandon Smith scored 59 points. So he had a couple of little attacking stats here and there, but it really was a worker's game. Now, he's been averaging under 50 meters per game so far this year, and he had a 100-plus meter game in that game. So if he's going to do well, and when he did win the Dame Hooker of the Year, he was top of the chart for dummy half runs. So if he's going to do well at the Roosters, he's going to have to be at the top of that stat again. And it looked like he might start creeping into that again. If he can be that guy, he's probably a 700K player. Same as Api Coruscant here too. 491K. Now, Brandon Smith's available at mid and hooker, which is a big plus. Coruscant's just at hooker, but look, 491K. They're running Talon De Silva now. They're not going to give him huge minutes, but he seems to be the future. They've re-signed Coruscant though, so he's obviously their play. With them being out of the finals race, there is a chance that Coruscant gets shut down or the minutes wind down as the season goes on. But at the same time, Coruscant is a guy who theoretically could be worth 700K at some point next season. So you can take that gamble. Look, 491K, you got to be desperate to be making this move. It's like when we talked about Reid Marnie a month ago, and he scored amazing after we made that recommendation, and then last week went back to the bench, scored nothing for you. So Coruscant, similar kind of player. Jerome Hughes is the last one here. Look, 621K. I don't think you need to reach this low. I'd rather go with a guy like Trey Evans or a guy like Munster or one of those other options there that's around the 700s. Just make that little bit of extra cash if you can. But look, Jerome Hughes is a guy who has form runs where he is a fantasy gun. So he's here. I wouldn't do it, but he is here. Wildcards. This is for the crazy coaches among us. And let me know in the comments if you're going to buy one of these guys. Or actually, just let me know your trades in general. But especially if you're buying a wild card, I want to hear about it because you're hopping on a roller coaster. And I want to sign off any responsibility I have before you buy this ticket and get on. So, look, wildcards. Dane Laurie, first one here, 483K. Now, he was a guy that we looked at a while ago and just thought, he scores pretty well in the halves. He scored nearly a 50-point game last week. That was in a loss. It was in a game where he didn't have big attacking stats. I think he had a line break there, maybe a line break assist, so some light attacking stats. But look, in the halves, he scores great for fantasy. He runs the ball a ton, makes his tackles. He's just a good fundamental footy player. And he's got Luke Brooks alongside him now too. So that's not a bad situation for them to be in, especially with the quality of edge back rowers they have too. For Laurie, you have to be desperate. He's more of a fantasy draft guy. I've actually got a waiver in for him for draft right now because I just think he's rock solid in that half spot. Aaron Clark's the next one. He's one we recommended last week in the high 300s, I believe. Look, he's got 2 more weeks. Tino's out for 3 weeks. One of those weeks has passed. 2 weeks left. Aaron Clark is the starting lock through that time. Played 55 minutes, which is not crazy, so I wouldn't expect 70 from him every week. He scored that try. I'd probably say a 45 average is pretty safe to predict for him going forward. Maybe even a 40. I wouldn't go as high as 50 personally, unless there's attacking stats, which he can find. Aaron Clark, look, 2-week rental, totally up to you. Matt Lodge, 487k. This one's interesting because he moved to Manly. He played, what was it, about 55 minutes, scored 59 points, something like that. 487k. He's named to start again this week. Matt Lodge is a guy who can produce for fantasy when he gets those sorts of minutes, and he ran 150 meters in that game too. Now, I don't know what's going to happen with Manly's forwards. They have a lot of these guys like Josh Aloiai and Paseka, who's out now. Actually, that helps a lot, but that also helped last week with his minutes. Yeah, look, Paseka being out actually does carve a bit of a role for him. There's guys like Sipley, guys like Bullimore, Sean Kepi. Like, there's a lot of those guys who haven't cemented a role completely in this pack, and they hop between starting side and the bench. So I think Matt Lodge might secure that spot for them. 47k. If you need a middle and you want maybe a 40 average, I like Matt Lodge there, and he's another guy you could look at in your draft leagues if you've lost someone recently. Billy Burns, this is wild. He's pumping it though. He's absolutely pumping it. He's not relying big on attacking stats. 473k. He's averaging, I don't know the exact number. It's like 55 as a starter in his 3 games, and he looks like he'll keep those minutes as well. So I don't know. I didn't trust him because we've seen so many Dragons edge back rowers come through. We've seen heaps of guys sort of come into that spot and then get dropped on game day or get 1 week, or Jack Bird comes in or whatever it is. So Burns was sus, but now we got him and Dan Russell there. It kind of reduces the risk on both of them because they're both not proven guys. So, and I doubt they rush Bird in with the injuries he's had too. Campbell Graham, last one here, 577k. Look, Campbell Graham is not actually that risky at all. Their fixtures are great. He's a great fantasy scorer. He's averaging 46 points a game. 577k is a good price. He's just a pod. He's a big pod. He could average like 60 over the next month. Great fixtures. He's a guy who scores a try. I just reckon that could be really sneaky, especially if you want to get yourself in the grand final. But again, Souths players don't play round 26, so keep that in mind. He's one of those guys. The hold or sell now. Now, this is where we're making way for some of these players. Look, a lot of people have been hitting me up about trading Joey Manu. 711k is interesting there. I'm gonna lay out a few pros and cons. Look, on the pro section, Joey Manu, he's one of the highest averaging centers in NRL Fantasy. The con there is that he's averaged about 43 points a game when playing center specifically. So that's compared to about 50 average when he's playing across the board, and 50 plus at fullback or at half. Now, for that reason, I'm thinking Joey Manu, look, it's not a great average at center. It doesn't look like he'll get too much more time in the spine. They have tough fixtures, so they have the Roosters this week. So for all those reasons, you could maybe sell. The other thing there too is 711k. If you were trading Joey Manu for Dylan Edwards, you're freeing up 150k. And I reckon there's a good chance they score roughly similar down the stretch of this season. So if you can free up 150k, and that gets you the cash you need to go Hopgood to Cleary, for example. I'm not saying what to do, but that could work. Saying that, full disclosure, I am keeping Joey Manu myself. I think he's valuable. Still, I think he's going to have some big games. The other thing is the Roosters play the first game of the round this week, so you can loophole him. And again, I'll do the loopholing video soon. Make sure to tune in for that. But for Joey Manu, you can loophole him. You can see how he scores, and you can choose to bring him in. And we talked about some of those cash outs who will let you do that. So Joey, it's a coin toss. I think he's a little overpriced, but I don't think you need to sell him, and I think he's a valuable center/wing fullback. Sandon Smith's the next one here, and Sandon's been solid. Like, people are talking about selling him. 411k, I don't think it's enough to warrant the selling. I mean, you could do it, and you'd make a bit of cash. Like, what? If you did a full cash out, and you're looking at 190k, and if that justified you getting the Cleary from Hopgood or Preston or something like that, then maybe you do it. I personally am enjoying him as a bench guy that could maybe plug in. He's playing the first game of the round this week, so he'll be a loophole option as well for me with the double loophole. I'm trying to hold on to him, but if you have too many trades and not enough dollars, then move him on. Move him on very quickly. If you're short on trades, hold on to him. I think he could be more valuable than you think. Dream Buller, look, 534k. He had 2 nice fixtures. So he had the Knights and the Dragons, and we talked about that a couple of weeks ago, that was the period to maybe hold him. He had 1 massive game and 1 pretty average game. 534k, I think it's time to sell. That's a different price. So you can make good cash. You can make 300,000+ on him. You can move him to Dan Russell or something like that, and you can do anything here. So you could go Dream Buller and Jacob Preston to Cleary and Finifuyaki or Dan Russell or something like that, and that is big upside. That is big upside there. So I'd be selling Buller pretty quickly. I think the Tigers, they could bounce back actually. I mean, we got Brooks back. We got Laurie in there. Their forward pack's looking good. Coruscant looks fit. There could be a bounce back, but there also could just be that slide off. So he's just not that top tier gun for me. Jermaine Hopgood. Well, this is also another interesting one. So I actually don't have Hopgood, but if I had Hopgood, it's the price. It's the price. 802k. Is he worth 802k? Probably not at this point. Regan Campbell-Gillard coming back, definitely not. Doesn't play round 27 as well, so that's the final round of the year. He's not lining up. But he is eligible for middle and edge, and I do like that. So when we look at edges, obviously Dave Fafita is that top guy. But he's even getting some minute questions now with the Titans falling off. But still, Dave Fafita is that guy. And then you look at guys like John Bateman. Nakora, I think, is dodgy with the Sharks. I'd probably be selling Nakora, actually, if I had him, because I think Sharks are going to fall off a cliff here. So Nakora's a bit dodge. Isaiah Papali'i's been inconsistent. John Bateman has been solid, but he's back to the edge again. Fanua is in the lock role. I think Jermaine Hopgood is close enough to the second best edge back row that you probably hold on. But if there was a trade you needed to make where it freed up enough cash for you to make a move, maybe you do it. I mean, even then, John Bateman is not historically as durable as Hopgood is. So maybe you buy Bateman to free up cash and then he gets hurt. I think you're asking for trouble. As I've talked about this, I've sort of thought about it. Hopgood is a hold in my eyes. And the last one here is Jacob Preston. That's where the sell comes in. The Dogs just sort of fallen off a cliff. They do have him and Kickout back, which is really nice for them. They got Sexton back too. So the Dogs could see a bit of a form revival. But I just think at 692k, you had that week off as well with the flu. I sold him a while ago. He was definitely a sell last week. I think it's time to go, Jacob Preston. I think, like, we're talking about these moves you can make a move, get rid of Preston, and buy one of the top guns. Buy Payne Haas, buy Isaiah Yeo, buy Nathan Cleary. Buy one of these guys. He's close enough in price that you can do it if you cash down one of your cheapies there. So, look, that's the buy, hold, sell for this week. Let me know in the comments who you're buying, holding, and selling on. And we'll do a video on loopholes shortly as well. Make sure to like and subscribe too, and we'll see you on the next video.